Hello, everyone. A very, very warm welcome to another episode of 8 Ounces of Inspiration. And today I have been able to get hold of a very, very important person that I have been trying to pursue to get into the podcast because I think he's an inspirational person who can really change the way we look at life, especially for the youth. And he is Devang Bhandari, who was recently appointed the global COO for the ESG advisory practice for KPMG. He also leads KPMG's global delivery capability in deal advisory and strategy and is the CSR lead for KPMG Global Services in India. Welcome, Devang. I'm not yet finished. I'm going to go on about your amazing resume. While he works hard, he balances it perfectly well by indulging in his hobbies of music and instruments. Devang is a guitar player and plays tennis as a sport, and he's an amazingly passionate freestyle dancer. I have seen him in action, so I can say that. He also co founded a program with like minded friends called the Gratitude Project, through which they deliver nutritious meals to the underserved population at a subsidized rate. He is invested strongly in CSR projects and was personally present with his team in Kochi during the floods and raised funds and built 20 homes for the displaced. He's also engaged with the Nudge Foundation to mentor and work with social impact startups working in rural development and agricultural industries. So, welcome, Devang, and thank you for taking out time for this podcast.
Thank you so much, Nidhi, for having me on the podcast. This is truly humbling, but thank you very much. And apologies, it took us a while, but here we are.
Yeah,
So
but
thank you
I'm
so much.
glad we're doing it together. So, my first question to you, right? We'll get to it straight since I want to try and cover as much as possible about your life and journey. You come from a very small town, right? Kalyan, and you came from a very humble background. Share with us a couple of things. One, what was it like being brought up with very simple values? You went to a very simple, regular school,
Yeah.
and I look at parents today. Why I'm asking this question specifically to you is because I see parents today and they take so much self pressure and they pressurize their children to put them into top schools. That's on their agenda. My child has to go to the top school, the top boarding school, to pave their path, which they think would create success for their child. But I look at you and you went to a very normal school in a very small town, not in a big city, and look where you are, right? So I want you to share your message to the parents who are just putting a lot of pressure and in the whole race, somewhere forgetting to make their kids' life joyful in their childhood.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the question. I think it's a great question, and I think is quite critical for today's generation and for today's parents. I think growing up, a few things which were very clear. One was just the value of hard work, and regardless of whichever school you go to, as long as you're putting your effort, it doesn't matter, right? So at the end of the day, there is some level of grounding which happens at home, and I think both mom and dad were very clear with that. So that thankfully made it easier for me because it was just about focusing regardless of the environment you're in, and then you try and make the most of what you've got. And I think that sort of is the biggest sort of mantra that helped, regardless of whatever situation you're in. Second, I think given the background and so forth, you tend to actually become a bit more sort of conscious of your surroundings and much more quicker than you would be in a very highly protected environment. So I think again something which goes back to my mom, which she's always sort of left me and said, go and do it and don't worry about it. So we didn't have as protected environment as I think the parents try and give their kids, which I think is perhaps one of the reasons why they are also getting anxious in the process, and the kids are also getting, developing angst in the as a result. Um, I think last but not the least is it's clear to me after so many years that um, the institution which you go to, the marks you get, does not really make a decision of what you will be as a person and as a professional. So personally and professionally, going forward, it's a great indication of something. If you put in effort, then you'll get it. And I'll be the first one to sort of admit that there were stages, there were years when I didn't put in effort and I didn't get anything. So it's as simple as that. So it's really around going to the renowned schools is great because you get good exposure. But if you're going to a reasonable school or you're going to a school in a small city and whatnot, that does not put you at any disadvantage as long as you are determined to put the hard work on. So I think for parents, it's really around saying, look, accept where we are and then work with the kids without any pressure to say, let's just give it all what you've got and we have your back. I think that's probably most important, and hopefully things will work out. But yeah, that's simple.
I totally agree with you on this because I come from a small town myself, right? And I realized this that while, of course, parents worry. I went to a boarding school because my parents just didn't want me to be in a state board, which is probably ranked the worst state board in India. But there is something about when we put a lot of pressure on ourselves just to, like, sometimes incomes are pressurized to just put that I have to put my child in the school, and I know I can't afford a lakh a month or 50,000 a month, or somebody would say 2 lakhs a month, but I'd still do it because I think that'll get my child something, right? And when that something doesn't happen, then there is a lot of disappointment. And I think that is the big problem that is faced today, the disappointments that children have. And I think they don't know how to handle it. Because, like you said, it's such a strong protected environment that we grow up, bring them up in, that they don't know what it's like to be in a bus and get lost and then find your way through to come back. There's always a car, a driver, or a parent driving them, and there's this sense of, no, don't do this. I just don't want any harm's way.
Yeah,
right?
and I've seen so many examples, a few examples where people have been thoroughly successful throughout the beginning stages of your life, and have never experienced any resentment early on or failures early on, but then later on one event, and literally it sort of puts them into a different zone altogether, and they're very difficult. It's very difficult for them to come out of it. So I would actually say that it also helps to sort of experience some of those ups and downs up front, because that's what's going to define your character. And I think the ability for parents to not being able to put into an expensive school does not mean that the child is not going to be successful, right? So I think focusing on the right values and the right and just be with them, right? Being with them, I think, is what matters. And because the pressure, when they have pressure, the pressure is by default going to come onto the kids, which is for sure. So.
Which takes me to the next question. So the college also that you went to for your MBA, in the US, it's not one of the, say, the top colleges that parents usually shortlist for their children when they are, preparing them for going abroad. And now with this whole culture of having a counselor being 3 lakhs, 5 lakhs to make sure your child gets into an Ivy League, and there's just so much preparation that goes into it. You are just a different story who went to a school that is very lesser known than the other bigger schools or the more, regular schools that kids apply to, let me put it this way. But simply through your hard work, by taking risks, by taking every opportunity that came your way, you have created a path and a career for yourself that has got you where you are. You're the COO of it, and you've done amazingly well in your career. And again, no Ivy League to your name. and no big boarding school or no big fancy, IB school to your name, and you still are where you are. So how, what is the message you would give to students who probably also don't get into an IIT, which their parents have been training them, or who don't get into an Ivy League that they've been preparing for, but they go to a regular college, every college is good in America, they give you a lot of education. How is it that you can get the best out of any college and then use that to your advantage to push your career?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think a couple of things, right? I mean, I think quite openly, the reason I didn't get into a good school because I didn't have a good GMAT score. And again, I'm just sort of going to go back and say, okay, whatever situation you have, then you sort of deal with it, right? And so that was one. Luckily, though, I was able to sort of select a school which had, which was obviously not as in the top Ivy schools or whatnot, but had the good professors. So I said, okay, at least I've got some really good professors who've got some very good pedigree, and I can sort of depend on at least in the areas of my interest. So that was, I think, so trying to look at the positive of what I need to sort of work with, I think was one of the most important bits. The second most important bit was really around saying, even when people get into good schools, right? Many students get into this idea saying, okay, everything is going to get sort of will be given to them. And then for people who are going to regular schools like what I did, again, just to reiterate, nobody's going to give you anything on a silver platter. You have to ask for it. You have to continuously look for opportunities, especially for students who are in the same sort of situation as I was many years ago. So my only advice to them is, don't worry about it. I think let's try and figure out what is the positives you can take out of where you are, and really go for an extra mile beyond what maybe is being provided to you, and see if you can ask for it. So as some concrete examples, when I was at this campus, I had like 4 or 5 jobs because I had to sort of get through my living expenses and so forth. Otherwise, there was no way out. But as a result of some of the good work I did, I was able to do internship with one of my professors where I did some interesting projects. The same professor I worked with on doing some statistics related research, which worked well for my job placement. Again, I worked at one of the cooperative banks in a local region through an accounting professor of mine in Oregon. Again, just given the hard work I put in, and he was sort of happy to see that. And all those opportunities sort of really added on to building the exposure and building some of that depth, which I think I would have not, which I would have missed, I guess, otherwise. So I think number 2 is really around, do not wait for anyone to serve anything to you on a platter. You'll have to ask, you'll have to look for those corners where you have the opportunity to really take it forward and just keep working at it. I think, again, as I said, the schools do not define who you will be as a person. It's a great head start. So I don't deny the fact that someone going to someone going to Wharton, and as an example, versus a business school I went to, that individual will have a significant advantage to start with. But does that mean that you will not be able to achieve or do whatever that individual is able to? Absolutely not. Everybody's got their own timings, but I think most important is, if you just keep at it, I think you will figure it out.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And it's such a great, it's a breath of fresh air hearing it, that it's okay. Because I think children nowadays put too much pressure on themselves, and it comes too much from the parents, about look at the neighbor and then look at you, what are you doing, all of that, right? So I think just knowing that there is a story that they can latch on to, that look, it worked for him, it can work for me. I just got to put in the hard work, do the right things, and be on the right path with the right mindset, and it'll work out, right?
The only other thing I'll add here, just very quickly, again, is look, as long as you've got the focus, you've got the intention, you've got the hard work. I'm the last person who will say there is. In fact, I don't believe in a self-made person, because I do believe that there are those higher up energies out there which actually puts things in alignment for you. But for that to happen, you have to have that focus. You have to put in your hard work, because without that, nobody's going to give you. And there are a whole host of people who come together, whether without you realizing it, who will sort of help you through the journey.
Yeah,
So
they
I think
enable
this
your
is,
growth.
yeah. So this is kind of the only other thing I would want to say is, have your pure intentions, have your hard work, put in, show in, and I'm pretty sure the higher up energies will align to sort of get you where you need to.
And that brings me to my third question. You know, I have such different set of questions for you. It's amazing. Because when I was reading your bio and I was doing my homework, my research, and I'm like, oh my God, these questions I've never asked anyone on my podcast. So it's really amazing that I'm getting this opportunity to do this, because I really want the youngsters to hear this. In today's world, I see a lot of children start to drink at a very early age. A lot of parents are really struggling with their children smoking at a very early age, early teens, right? It could be under pressure, peer pressure, stress pressure. I don't know how they'll handle the rest of the life stress when they get stressed with their books now. And also because they feel that's a way to network, especially when they move into the corporate world, right? So they feel if they smoke, if they drink, they are one with the crowd, otherwise they'll be left out for the happy Fridays and all of that. Now you are a person, you're a teetotaler, you've never indulged in any of this, no vaping, no smoking, no drinking, you have a very simple lifestyle, and you've still managed to go up the corporate ladder through, again, the decisions you took, the choices you made, and create a name and face for yourself. Nobody penalized you because you didn't have a glass of drink in your hand. Nobody not invited you to a meeting because you don't smoke or drink. Nobody stopped being friends with you because they thought you were not fun because you don't drink. So I want you to share this with others, that how can they find that strength in themselves to say, it's okay if I'm the only person in the crowd of millions who doesn't drink. How do I stand my ground? How do I say that that's a choice I've made? And I'm okay with it, even if it may mean that I am isolated from a few parties. I'm isolated from a few gatherings, or some friends fall out because they think I don't drink, so I'm no fun. It's okay. How do you get that?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think, and I've been in sort of various situations where, for example, I'll narrate an instance. So we had our firm had a offsite sort of an annual event in San Francisco, and one of the night's theme was champagne bar hopping, where we had the firm had booked the transportation, and we were going from one champagne bar to the other champagne bar and so forth. That night, I remember the amount of lemonade I had the entire night. I think never had in my life, and I think I didn't have that lemonade for at least few months because I was just sick of it. But I think the point is really saying, look, if you don't drink, does not mean you should sort of there are few things I would sort of highlight. Basic human values shine regardless of where you are. Regardless, and people recognize, people see it. What does that mean? Is if you've got empathy, if you have consideration, if you are an individual who've been considerate, who sort of who are who's easy to work with, all will go out and help folks. I think people see that. And again, I'm not saying that you do it just to sort of impress someone. So the basic human values shine regardless. So I think that's number one. Number two is, yes, I've seen many times where people go through an identity crisis to say, what is it, my identity, right? Where do I belong? And that's when I think things start to go wrong, where people try and ape, saying, okay, maybe I need to become a bit more cooler. If I drink, I'll be a lot more cooler, or people will, I'll be able to sort of have those discussions and so forth. at a pub or a bar. I've been part of those discussions where people have talked about different types of whiskeys and whatnot, and I sometimes I've had blank expressions, but that is okay, right? I think um, one thing which is very important is if you try and be somebody when your innate value is not, then you're just going to force yourself, and it will not give you happiness, nor it will sort of create any impression whatever you want to create. In fact, interestingly enough, now we are at the age, or in the current period, where people appreciate far more openness. They'll accommodate you a lot more than what I think they would accommodate during the time when I was sort of growing up and so forth. So taking pressure just to sort of impress somebody is not going to get you anywhere. That's number one. Number two is hold on to your own identity, because that's ultimately what's going to shine. And number three is have the basic set of human values which will carry you through regardless of where you are. And last but not the least, not drinking does not mean you don't participate, right? People would sort of people will see the fun side of you, even if you're not drinking, because you're going out with them, you're chit chatting, at the end of the day, there are common sets, regardless of different cultures, there are common themes people talk about. Even if, say, for example, in the US, I don't like some of the US sports, so I never got into it. But that does not mean that you can't have other interesting conversations. So the point is, do not aloof yourself. If you're not drinking, does not mean you have to aloof yourself and be outside, because that doesn't help. Absolutely be open to going out, even if you know that you're going to end up bringing something else, which is absolutely fine. Engage yourself. But I think overall, all of this will help. I mean, I have some of my closest US friends who are avid drinkers, who drink and whatnot. But we found a common connection, and that sort of gets you going. So my request to everybody is, do not be under any pressure whatsoever. It does not mean anything whether you drink or you smoke or whatnot, because ultimately you will find your way through this.
Yeah. And I think if the youth can understand that this negatively affects their body, their physical being, right? So to indulge in it because they think it can create a better career for them is like a false myth. And I think nowadays, a lot of the youth are appreciated. If they don't drink, they can at least be the designated drivers. So they can be the ones taking care of their friends who really indulge and still be a part of the gang. That brings me to my next question, which has been, share your biggest accomplishment and achievement in your professional career that's very memorable or close to heart with you. Of course, you've had so many, but one.
So I think, as they say, your first achievement is usually the achievement which sticks with you for a longest period of time. And I think that came in, I mean, I'm talking about professionally right now, because personally, there are bigger things than this, but which is when I got promoted as a manager within the KPMG US firm when I was in Chicago. And I didn't expect this to get promoted. And this was it came a year before I thought it would. And then why it's such a significant achievement is because in the way our firm is structured, the moment you become a manager, you are basically leading engagements by yourself. You're talking to the clients by yourself. Sometimes you're working with the partners directly, and or sometimes you end up working with directors and partners and so forth. But that position of getting to a manager, it's like, as they say, there is a period when you transition from a boy to a man or a girl to a woman. I think it's the same way for a professional. You transition into actually a kind of a management, a professional sort of consciousness when you become a manager, because that's the first sort of milestone you get to. So I think when my partner gave me that indication, I remember both me and my wife sort of talking about it, and I said, that can't be true. But both of us were literally wide awake through the night, staring at the ceiling, saying, is this really happening, or is this really true? And then the next day I did find out that was true. And so I always narrate that to folks who get promoted to managers in our firm. saying this is probably cherish that moment because that's the first moment, but you'll cherish that for the lifetime.
Wow, that's so beautiful. So yeah, while we're talking about the accomplishments and the great things, there must have, of course, been several challenges, while you tread this path, right? You're managing so many people, you are managing a lot of revenue, billion-dollar accounts. Share a challenge that you faced early on, or maybe in the later part of your career, which almost sometimes some challenges create these inflection points for us, right? And makes us realize, like, oh God, I got to do things differently, or I didn't do enough. Share something with us and how you overcame it.
Yeah, I think a couple of I guess so. One thing I remember, so when I was talking about you need to make the best of whatever school you go to, and this was literally my first term in the US, um, and I went to a school which clearly is not that known, but great professors and so forth. But the first term, I was distracted, and I think the marks I got out of that first term was not as good as I thought it should be. And I remember my girlfriend slash fiance at that point of time sort of telling me, saying, if you're going to just do this and get distracted and not really put in your hard work, then there's no point, because there are a whole lot of people banking on you. But most importantly, your parents are banking on you far more to that extent. And that was kind of a reflection point, because yes, I think I was trying to, I mean, of course, to be fair to myself, it took some time to get used to the US system, because I was not used to the open book system. And when the first time when they said, oh, you can bring your book in the examination hall, I was like, oh, that doesn't make any sense. But then I realized the question paper was drafted in such a different way that none of us are used to in India as much. Now perhaps people are, but so that I think was a inflection point, because I said, yeah, this is not happening, and I need to really put in a lot of the work, and no amount of excuses, right? Even if I'm trying to give excuses, and maybe there are genuine excuses, I'm only giving it to myself, not to anyone else. So I think that was clearly one inflection point. And then I think the second inflection point was really around in the professional world, when you started my career with KPMG in the US. I think how to manage people, how to provide them feedback, how do you sort of grow the team, how do you work with the team. I think a lot of that I sort of learned there. So and this is not our fault, but I think to some extent we are really in India, we are sort of I think lag a bit behind in terms of appreciating people. I think that's number one. We are very, very quick to criticize people, and as a result, we become very blunt and very inconsiderate, because sometimes you don't know what's going on in other person's mind, and some of that sort of I had to iron out some of that, and my performance manager at that point of time actually told me that you need to sort of take some of this into consideration, understand what the other person might be going through. There's no harm in giving constructive feedback, because people need to do better, but you probably need to sort of learn through this. And so that was kind of the other inflection point, I think, which then helped me to really focus on people side of it in a lot better way than I think I would have otherwise.
So, which brings me closer to my last few questions, which are more on a personal level. You travel extensively. You have huge work commitments, as of course I said in my bio. You are a fun-loving person who loves to dance. You're a movie buff. You want to play tennis. You want to play the guitar. You spend a lot of time with your family. How does a person who is at that point in their career manage to balance it all? What is the mantra for you?
Yeah, I think one simple rule, I think, and while I followed it, but I think it sort of also got reinforced recently in a book. I can't recollect the name of the book right now, but what I do and what I've been following is put everything on your calendar. I think that's the simplest rule ever. including the point around putting kids off to sleep, including the point, so here is where I need to take a break, or here things I need to do separately, which is outside the work. Our firm is sort of great in providing that flexibility, sort of you can take some of that time off in between as and when you need it, and so forth. So putting that in a smarter way throughout the week, planning it a lot more ahead of time. I think those are the two simple rules which I follow, and I appreciate that planning far more than I appreciated before. Of course, there will be ups and downs. There will be weeks where things will come from different from different sides which you would not have anticipated. But that's fine. At least you are able to adjust and readjust and so forth. So I think that's one side. The other side is really around. I think at the end of the day, we are all learning, growing, and we are in this material world. But how do you start to connect your spiritual grounding and build that over a period of time really helps you to sort of manage some of this. So, for the last more than a year or year and a half, I've been doing a bit of meditation and so forth. And that's a daily routine every day for 10, 15 minutes. And that really gives me enormous amount of energy through the day and so forth. And it also gives you that 15 minutes of pause in your life where you are able to reflect and so forth. But more importantly, able to sort of connect with the higher energy. Right? So I think that's one biggest mantra. The second is just, as I said, put everything onto your calendar, including all your. I remember one of my senior partners long time back had mentioned that treat your family as your number one client. I'm talking from a professional services standpoint, and that means that all important elements, important milestones from a family standpoint are non-negotiable. So I am still being guilty of missing some of those milestones once in a while, but as much as possible, I try and manage that. So I had a important client call as an example coming up, and I requested the client saying, "Hey, can we do this, a little later or a day later, if that's okay, given it's an important milestone from our family standpoint," and the client understood, and that was fine. There are situations where you're not able to do it, which is absolutely fine, but it's kind of balancing, right? You will never get 100% of everything. So as long as you can get 70% out, I think.
And I think for the rest of the 30, the family sees the intent and the effort you're making to make it happen, so they become forgiving and they're okay with it. And the other part, so that's okay.
Yeah.
So when I was reading your bio, now I see that a lot of your work or your professional interest is very strongly grounded in doing activities that make an impact. So you've been spearheading CSR, you've been involved in other outside of KPMG, maybe certain activities. So is this, you call like that, okay, now this is a phase in my life where I've been there, I've done that, I've got everything that I really wanted out of my career. And now it's time for me to start seeing what I can do best for the community and give back. Seems like it's a very strong element in your being.
Yeah, no, I think two things. I think one major turning point in my life was I actually went through a midlife crisis just about the time when I was turning 40. So I think while externally everything was going great, but I think internally I was sort of doing a bit of soul searching in terms of where this life is going and where, what is my purpose. And I think by chance I sort of got involved in some specific CSR initiatives where our firm asked in KPMG Global Services if someone is interested in sort of leading the CSR effort for the firm, and I raised my hand. And I think that was sort of the turning point, because I would say literally that sort of got me out of my midlife crisis, because I could then see it very clearly, what really matters at the end of the day. So that was, I think, number one. And then from there on, the spiritual journey also started. And then I, one of the famous quotes I came across, which was of Swami Vivekananda, where he says that, hey, I asked God to give me peace, and he showed me how to serve people. And I think that sort of is really resonates very well with me, and I and that's how I then consciously started to take my career towards that journey, towards that impact area. And very fortunate that the firm has been able to give me the opportunity to sort of combine what personal and professional sort of alignment in terms of what I'm doing and so forth. That does not mean that even if, say, for example, your professional life is not aligned, then you can absolutely create an impact outside of the ecosystem and so forth. So I think my humble advice to anyone is, for some it may be maybe another path to take. For some, the path may be slightly different. Doesn't matter. But as long as you're thinking about what's your higher purpose and reflecting on it, I think you will find the answer today or tomorrow. Otherwise, we'll all end up just living a rat race. And at the end of the day, when we sort of really reflect on, we'll be like, okay, we've literally wasted our life and haven't really done anything fruitful beyond your own circle of influence.
Yeah, absolutely. I get you. So, my last two questions to you. One, what evokes emotions in you?
I think humanity is, I think, a clear answer, just in terms of, that sort of aligns with my personal saying, okay, how can I help and how can I sort of serve the community? So I think that's one. Emotions is, I think, it's sort of, it goes throughout the day, but what gets you going, right? If I were to sort of really modify this and put it in saying what gets me going is the excitement to do something challenging, which has hopefully a higher, bigger impact from a community standpoint. That's number one. Number two is an opportunity for me to learn something new. Learning has been a core part of my sort of career build out. I've sort of done a number of courses, although I've got to a point where if I do another course without consulting my wife, I think she's going to kick me out of the house. But so learning is something very important. And then last but not the least, very patriotic in the right way, of course, not in a fanatic way, but very patriotic. So want to sort of make sure that through my actions, at least people see, what we can bring as on the table from our country standpoint and so forth. So that's kind of a few things which helps me going throughout.
Wonderful. And my last question, or rather last request, a message to the youth.
I think the biggest message is believe in your own identity. Do not try and worry about what you cannot be. In fact, focus on what you can be, because all the power of whatever you want to become is all within you. So I think that's number one. Number two is have the sincerity and hard work, and I guarantee that the energy above is going to align the stars, and you will get to do what you want to do. So just go for it. Doesn't matter whether you are in a renowned school or not, or renowned organization or not. I think make the best of what you've got, and trust me, I think things will work out.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Devang. I think 45 minutes have just flown by, and it's been such an engaging and such an insightful conversation with you. And I think more than just anything else, hearing you will really, really resonate with a lot of the youngsters who are searching for answers and searching for how can they resist from this peer pressure, the parent pressure, the community pressure that becomes sometimes very overwhelming for them, and that almost gets them to a break point. So they need to hear it from people like you that, look, there is life beyond, and stay with who you are. Be that, like I always say, be that zebra, with a different stripe, and stand out, because that's your uniqueness. So don't just try and blend it.
No, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me for the podcast. So I had a lovely time. Thank you very much for all the great questions.
Pleasure is all mine.